building. I would like to begin by acknowledging and celebrating the first Australians on whose traditional lands we meet, and paying my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. It's my pleasure, I didn't really have much choice. It's my pleasure to introduce tonight's prestigious speaker, Mahendra Mahey, who is first and foremost a research school of the humanities and the arts of the College of Arts and Social Science at the ANU's funded academic visitor, but he is also the guy who is responsible for running the British Library Labs, which is a digital platform that enables access to the British Library's digitized collections, the British Library being one of the largest, if not the largest, national libraries anywhere in the world. So Mahendra is going to take us on a magical mystery tour of the British Library, its collections, and the projects.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Mahendra, and is that? Sorry.
First hurdle.
Okay. Is that me? Does that need to be on? Try to switch it on. Oh, yeah? Okay, focus. Then how do I? Okay, that's good. Okay. So I'm going to be talking about a project I've been working on at the British Library now for 6 years. And in a nutshell, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get people to experiment with the library's digital collections. That's pretty much my job. Sounds really simple. It's not, it's really difficult. And I'm going to take you on a little bit of a journey. This is kind of a bit of a summary of, that's the title of my presentation. I just kind of made it eye-catching, digital magical mystery tour. It's up to you to decide whether it actually will be or not. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to be talking about the work I've been doing over those 6 years with researchers, artists, entrepreneurs, educators and innovators, and British Library staff who've been doing experiments and trying out new projects with our digital collections and data. And we've been doing this through a number of mechanisms: competitions, awards, projects, and other kinds of activities. And over the 6 years, we've probably supported over 160 projects, and we're a really small team at the moment. There's 2 of us. I think the most we've ever had is 2.5 people. So yeah, we kind of keep busy. And finally, I'm going to be talking about a global community that I'm trying to build with my colleagues, so that we can share our expertise, knowledge, wisdom, and our mistakes that we've made over the years, so that other galleries, libraries, archives, and museums, so that's the GLAM acronym, can, if they want to build a lab like ours, they can do without having to reinvent the wheel. So I'm going to take you on a very quick whistle-stop tour. I speak really quickly. I have loads of slides, okay? But you don't have to write anything down. You can download all my slides from here. That's my email address, if there's anything that piques your interest. Also, if you use social media, there's various Twitter accounts, and also that's WeChat, some links there if you want to go down and basically amplify what we do. That's great. So the project was originally funded by the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, an American funder, and over the last 6 months it's now permanently funded by the British Library. It's been a long journey for us. So, first of all, this whole presentation is fueled for my love of libraries. I've always loved libraries. They provide a bit of magic. That's actually a member of staff who's holding the Harry Potter exhibition book, our most popular exhibition that we've had at the British Library, The History of Magic. Unsurprisingly, it was the most popular. But in terms of what the library's purpose is, and it's pretty much our focus, is to provide research and inspiration and enjoyment for everyone. And when I joined the British Library, I was very conscious that the collections that we have belong to the world, because they were probably taken from lots of places in the world. But that's a bit of controversial comment which I will add to later. So, how many of you have actually been to the British Library? Wow, good, right, okay. For those of you that haven't, it's a kind of schizophrenic organisation. Its origins actually stem back to the British Museum Library in 1753. But its actual foundation as its own legal entity was 1973, so it's kind of young and old at the same time. The building in St Pancras in London looks like that. And for those of you that don't know, it's supposed to look like a ship, okay? A ship of knowledge sailing through a Gothic landscape. The Gothic landscape is provided by the St Pancras Renaissance Hotel. And for those of you that want to know a little bit of significant history, it's where the Spice Girls wannabe video was filmed. so just a little bit of a random fact there. So it's a reference library, it's a UK legal deposit library, so you can't take anything out. The main building in St Pancras has 4 stories below the building, and we store about 20% of our collection there. It's got space for about 1,200 readers, 11 reading rooms, 500,000 visitors per year. But we have a huge storage facility about 150 miles away in a place called Boston Spa. That's just a picture of one of the storage buildings, building 37, that uses sort of low oxygen, high nitrogen robots to sort of access the materials. So if you request an item that's at Boston Spa, where 80% of our materials are stored, it can take up to 48 hours to bring the item from Boston Spa to London and vice versa. So there's actually a reading room in Boston Spa as well. So you can request items from London and they will come from London to Boston Spa. It takes about 48 hours. We're also responsible for the public lending right, which is the author's right to payment for each time their book is taken out of a public library. So, this is the King's Library, which is the foundation collection of the British Museum Library, King George III. For those of you that are interested in history, that was mad King George. He was mad about books. He collected over 100,000 books. They became the foundation collection to the British Museum Library. But that's just some numbers. They're actually all made up. They're just guesses. There's lots of arguments about how much stuff we actually have. The reality is we don't know exactly how much stuff we have. These are kind of estimates, but you'll see 180 million items. Some people have said 250 million items. 14 million books, 60 million patents, 8 million stamps, 4 million maps, 6 million sound recordings, 1.6 million musical scores, 300,000 manuscripts. That's nearly a million now, a million serial titles. So that's, for example, the title of a newspaper or a magazine. So if you imagine we have every single day of that newspaper, for example, or and that's where we get a large part of our collection. So this is a metaphor. When I joined the library, I kind of really found it difficult to understand the scale of it. But if you imagine a huge hypermarket where only 7% of the stuff in there are books, because that's actually only, in terms of proportions, only 7% of our collection are books. So we're not just about books. But if you imagine a huge hypermarket with lots of random things on the shelves, and there's a huge warehouse at the back, that kind of gives you an idea of the scale. I also think of factories, but it's actually really quite difficult to imagine the scale of the British Library. We think we're the largest library in the world. The Library of Congress think they're bigger than us. We probably need to have a wrestling match to decide who's bigger. We have lots of things that aren't on our catalogue. They're still on card. So, there's a big debate. I think we're the biggest, but I'm slightly biased. So, first thing is I'm going to be talking about labs, and talking specifically about digital glam labs, and really I want to sort of define what they are. Okay, so they are a space to experiment and innovate and play either online or on-site with a library's digitized or born digital collections. So when I mean born digital, I mean things like websites, things that existed as digital first. And there's similar parallels to a sort of a traditional laboratory with test tubes and chemicals and so forth. They're often found in galleries, libraries, archives and museums, or GLAMs, sometimes in universities, and sometimes they're connected to the library and sometimes not. They tend to focus around cultural heritage, so digitized books and manuscripts and things like that. They provide a space to test and incubate ideas, importantly for people to make mistakes, to do experimental things like create, validate, capture, record, reproduce, archive and share results. The essential ingredients are things like data, so ones and zeros, lots of digital stuff. Things like text, images, 3D, sound, video, multimedia, and so forth. The equipment is things like software, hardware, storage, network, all the things that support digital stuff. Normally they have expert support and advice, so people who help those who are interested in doing things with the collections, digital collections. There's often a community with tutorials, examples, running events, competitions, awards, and projects. And where we are at the British Library is we're trying to make what we're doing business as usual, so making it part of the everyday offering of what a library is for. But if you think about the increasing focus on digital collections, this is something that institutions can't run away from. It's something that we're going to have to continue to provide services for and learn how to do it better. So this is why I think GLAM labs are sort of increasing, and these are some of the challenges we think they address. So institutions are spending a lot of money digitizing and capturing digital content. Okay? And the question is, we're storing all this stuff, what are people actually doing with it? And this is why I think labs are increasing around the world, because it's, we made all this investment. What are people actually doing with it? Importantly, when institutions set up labs, institutions have to ask themselves, well, what do we actually have? And how do we tell people about them? And that's something I'm extremely passionate about, because if you consider the way people look for things now, these days, on the internet, there are many, many things that are in institutions that either are not on the internet or people just simply don't know about. And I'm a strong, passionate believer in having to go out and tell people what we have. We have to go to people to tell them what we have, to inspire them. They won't come to us. And I think institutions have to accept that and not have that arrogance to assume people will come to us, because they won't. And that's something that I've learned over the 6 years. So we do a lot of engagement. We go out and talk to lots of people and try to get them enthused with things that we have that they don't know that we have. Because things are made available in digital form, it offers opportunities to do things that would be very difficult to do manually. So things that, instead of asking, selecting one item, choosing thousands or millions of items and using computational methods to search in them. So often, things that are being made available digitally means that you can do things that would be very difficult to do manually, like almost finding needles in haystacks. And often the challenge that a lot of institutions have is finding stuff in cultural heritage organisations particularly is very challenging. And I don't think institutions have solved this. And the reason for that is the way we describe things is very difficult for computers to actually discover things in it. I call that messy cultural heritage data. And the reason for this is humans are quite messy in the way they describe things. So for example, USA may be described U.S.A, or United States of America, or the States. Computers need to understand that distinction. Humans understand that distinction, but computers don't. So often this creates significant challenges to find stuff. But finally, the most important thing is imagine these institutions have these treasure troves of incredible things that are just waiting to be discovered and to be found and to be celebrated and to remix with contemporary culture, to celebrate them and remix them. So that's something that we do a lot with in our lab. So this is kind of a summary of what we do. So this is our audience and the blue blob, and these are things they're interested in. Okay? These are the collections we have. And what people often misunderstand is that our digital collections are only a small fraction of our physical collections. So at the British Library, it's only 3%. 3% of our physical collections are digitized. So you're talking about a very small little intersection there, which is the sweet spot, and that's where we work. We try to link up people's interests with our collections. And often, when I look at the randomness of our collections, I feel like I'm the proprietor of a sort of digital junk shop sometimes, because often people, when I show them something, and one of the questions they ask is like, why did you digitize that? And then I have to say, well, it's a long story, and I'll come back to some of that later. But this bit here, this sweet spot, is actually really, really hard to try to get that connection, and it involves lots of engagement. And because this percentage is so small, it means that people ask this question, do you have this digitized? And the chances are we don't, because it's such a small percentage. So when we started out on our journey, our focus was very much on researchers. But over the years, organically, we've worked with all these groups of people, because if you're in the business of opening up your collections and trying to encourage people to use them, other people want to use them. So artists, librarians, curators, educators, entrepreneurs, archivists, software developers, the general public. This has just happened organically. And at Labs, we've had a philosophy of never closing the door to anyone, because the collections belong to everyone. And what we try to do is facilitate that access so that people can use them. So how do we do this? We run competitions where we say, here's our stuff. Please come up with an idea of what you would like to do with it, with our digital collections, and then we will then work with you to help you answer your question. Or if you want to develop a shiny thing, we'll help you develop your shiny thing. The big lesson we've learned with competitions is we give a hard deadline where people then have to show the world what they've done. And that's very important working with specific groups, especially with academics, actually. So, little dig at academics, right? I've sort of been one as well, so I'm a hypocrite, right? So we've also now merged this into something called digital research support. So what that means is if you have a cool idea, tell us what you would like to do, and we will provide some support for you. It's up to 5 days. We call it 5 days incubation support. And what we're really doing is slapping your idea into reality. So whatever your crazy idea might be, we'll say, well, you can't do this, but you can do this. We have awards, and the awards are a cunning way to find out what people have already done with our collections. And they're a bit like the Oscars, right? And the way we do it, every year we have an Oscars ceremony, and I'm not going there, okay, I'm definitely not going there today. So this is a personal thing between us, right? This is to show what people have already done with our collections. And the reason why we did this was often people use our collections and don't tell us what they've done. So this is a way of getting that information off people. And the most powerful thing is, if you're trying to encourage somebody to use your collections, I can go on forever, but it's probably not that inspirational. But if I have a person who's actually done something, who's telling you what they did, that's going to probably inspire you. And that's why we do this. So we have research, artistic, commercial, learning and teaching, and even a staff category, because we have 1,600 staff and they do some incredible work. And the other reason I'm here is I'm very interested in talking about collaborative projects. So if any of you are inspired by anything I've said, have a conversation with me. 90% of the conversations I have end up nowhere, but the 10% could end up being huge projects. And we do this through lots of engagement, energy and fizzing with ideas. We run roadshows. They used to be UK roadshows. They've now become global, as you can see while I'm here today. We have events, meetings, and conversations. But what we're doing, if you remember that diagram with the blue and the red thing, we're trying to get that sweet spot. So, the first thing I wanted to sort of tell you about was our digital collections. And the most important thing to understand is all the collections within institutions represent biases. They are the result of human decision-making, subjective judgments, and decisions made about why certain things were collected. And it's no different with a digital collection. So I haven't got time to go into all of this. This is about 6 years of lessons learned, but it's really important to know the backstory of what makes up a digital collection. And there's things like who decided what got digitized in the first place. And what you'll be surprised with is when you look into a digital collection, you'll see gaps and you think, and then you say, what's that doing in there and stuff like this. And it's really important to not make assumptions, because there could be all sorts of reasons why certain things got digitized and certain things didn't get digitized. For example, it was too big for the scanner, so we put it back. Okay? There can be all sorts of crazy things. But the most important thing is that one, the big lesson I've learned. Is there a human being in your organization who can tell you about that collection? Because often the information is locked in their head and it's not written down. So here's a sort of a snapshot. I haven't got time to go into a lot of details about the collections that we have, but we record broadcast news, so we have TV and radio. So every TV and radio channel that broadcasts in English, we capture that digitally. We have music, we have sheet music, and we have recordings. We have recordings of world and traditional music, for example, various other music recordings. We have recordings from the environment, so animals, machines. We capture catalogue records. We capture the UK web. We've been doing that since 2003. So we've been capturing websites periodically, sometimes daily, sometimes weekly. Usage data, things that people use in the library. We have tons of maps, we have manuscripts, we have collections from China, Tibet and Mongolia, we have collections from the Middle East. We also use external platforms to put our data on, and that's a big lesson we've learned, is put your collections where the light is. Often the light does not shine on your institution. People don't necessarily care. They just want to find stuff. And we've used platforms like Flickr and Wikimedia Commons, just about to use Instagram. We're a bit behind the times, sorry. Playbills, books, newspapers, so we include OCR, which is the text from those publications, which kind of gives you a bit of a snapshot of what we collect. So this is the metaphor I would use for looking for our digital collection. So do you remember the big warehouse for the physical collections? So I'm imagining a sweet shop that only sells sweet things. It has free samples. It's a lot smaller than the warehouse. The shopkeeper will give you lots of sweets. Unfortunately, there are no crisps or salty things. So if you want those, you have to go to a different shop. If you speak really nicely, they'll let you into the back of the warehouse, and the back of the warehouse is mind-blowingly huge. So if I told you one of the collections we have, digital collections, I think we have 736. I didn't update my slides actually this morning, but one of the collections is the UK web. Right? So we are capturing websites every week, sometimes daily. That one collection are billions and billions and billions of sites. That one collection would dwarf everything in the British Library. So just imagine the scale. It's kind of mind-blowing. So how do you find things? Well, it's with great difficulty, actually. But as of today, we have 238 collection guides, and they're written by curators, and they take you on a journey by subject through the collections, and they always include a section on what's available digitally. We have a platform called data.bl.uk where you can download big blobs of data, big chunks. And we made a conscious decision very early on to treat all our digital collections as data. And every one of them we call data sets, and we give each one a unique identifier called a digital object identifier. And we put them up there, and you can download them for free, and you can do whatever you want with them. So we have 6 volumes of pub signs. That's a data set, for example. We have manuscripts, we have text, we have sounds. And the point here is that you're not just downloading one item, you're downloading thousands and thousands of items in one go. So you're changing the paradigm in terms of how libraries, for example, function. Not access to one thing, but thousands of things at the same time. We're moving all our stuff from this platform to this platform. We're still going to keep data.bl.uk. We need to do some serious work on our website. I look at it and I think, oh my God, we can do better than that. But anyway, that's where we have some of our stuff. And really, this is a bit of a warning. This is some technical stuff, but I'm just going to show you the kinds of things we're hoping to do in terms of research with our digital collection. So things like finding things by location. So if we know if things have been identified by location, we can find patterns in the data. We can visualize large collections of data. We can do things like crowdsourcing or human computation, annotation, transcription, things like text and data mining, doing stuff with text, using computational access to our collections, and even using things like machine learning and artificial intelligence. So apologies, this is quite technical, but this is obviously for more of the academic amongst you. But this is the kind of research space that we occupy, and really these are affordances because we are providing access to our digital collections. These are things that you can do easily using computers, depending on the quality of the data, of course. So, I've come to an event like this, okay, and I'm going to try to pretend to summarize the type of typical conversations I have with people when they ask me about collections. I'm not going to actually have a real conversation with any of you, right, but this is what typically happens, right? First one, oh my God, we have exactly what you're looking for, right? How often do you think that happens? About, I think in 6 years, about 10 times. Hardly ever happens. That one almost always happens. Well, we don't have 13th century Tibetan flute music.
Come on.
But we are digitized. We have physical. Your Library of Congress does. Well, see you later, right? The problem is, remember, we're a sweet shop. We don't have everything in the sweet shop. So often the conversation is, well, we don't have this, but we have this. So do you remember the blue and red circles? Trying to get that sweet spot actually is lots of hard work, lots of intellectually difficult hard work. It requires a lot of energy, a lot of enthusiasm to try to make those connections. We tend to attract projects with fuzzier boundaries, people who are more open to interdisciplinary collaborative research. So often, an academic who rocks up at one of our events, if we don't have what they need digitally, they just walk away. That happens a lot. Well, I'm really sorry, we don't have that 13th century Tibetan flute music. Try Library of Congress. So we tend to attract those often early career researchers, but people who are willing to be a bit more open about the collections they want to look at. What we've found actually is artists and creatives find this dialogue a lot easier. You can give an artist some really boring tax records and they can make it look beautiful, right? I haven't actually got a real example of that one, but something similar to that one. So this is sort of a summary of the best way to work with us. The first stage is explore. The big lesson we've learned is when people talk to us, they send us grand ideas of what they want to do. And the first thing that we know straight away is they've not looked at our data. They've not looked at the collections. They just made assumptions. So what we say is, please look at our collections first. I know it sounds obvious, but you need to know what sweets we've got before you can actually make your recipe or whatever. And often people want to do really computationally heavy things and actually they're not always relevant. So the big lesson is look at the collection first, and often you may want to do something that might be very difficult for the institution to support as well. So often you need to understand what the institution will accept culturally or not. So some crazy projects may not be supported by the institution. This is often a rethinking phase, but it's a bit like, please look in the box first before you come up with your ideas. By that stage, we hope you can then ask us a well-informed question based on actually having looked in the box. The second phase is much more focused and sharp, where you're actually looking at our data, and this is where you're kind of ready to ask for for some really detailed, intensive support. And finally, we recommend you create a hard deadline. Even if it's artificial, it's important to put a line in the sand and say, I'm going to stop at this point because otherwise I could spend the next 20 years trying to do this. Just put a month deadline, for example, and just see where you are. And honestly, doing that, it focuses the mind. Sometimes it means you make mistakes, but actually it's a big lesson we've learned. And then finally, once you've got that, you kind of have a reality check of what you can and can't do, and then you move on to what you're going to do next. So, we have a big challenge at the British Library. And the challenge is the following. Only 15% of our digital collections are openly licensed. 85% are only available physically on-site in the building, which creates huge problems and challenges for us. So you have things like they're only available in the reading room. Some of our digital collections are still on the magnetic tape, or the discs, or the DVDs, or the hard drives. They're not even online anywhere, not even inside. Sometimes you may have to pay some money to get access to them. And a very little amount is actually in this happy open space with the clouds and the smiling sun. That's about the 15%. What we've done is we've created a residency model, and I call it sometimes going behind the curtain. And this means that you have to be security cleared, you have to have a police check, okay? And then you get access to hot desks or digital research spaces in the reading room, which is something we're developing. So we're just about to launch these study carrels, which are lockable. They're called BL Labs Digital Research Spaces. And they're effectively hot desks in the reading room. But we're actually doing collaboration with the Royal Danish Library, which is actually the first national library in the world that has found a way to provide on-site computation for all their on-site only available digital collections. And we're working with the UK web archiving team that manage our UK websites. And we're actually testing something called a computational browsing service on all reading room computers. And we're using something called Jupyter Notebooks. And I know there's a few fans there in the audience. And this is effectively a browser on the internet where you can write code which is executable, which you can run, and then it will bring back the results within the browser. Imagine a search engine with rocket fuel. And here's an example of what a Jupyter Notebook looks like. And this is an experiment my colleague Andy ran in the UK Web Archive. We thought, okay, this is a collection of 19th century books. Let's look for the word telephone when the word telephone appeared in the 19th century. So if you look, this is code that's been written, and you see we're looking for the word telephone, a bit like a search engine. You can see that. And we ended up with this really weird anomaly. We thought, oh my God, have we just invented a time machine? Because here it seems to sort of correspond to the invention of the telephone. But for some reason, there are some items which have the word telephone in the book. We thought, what's going on here, right? Now, that would have been very difficult to do without Jupyter Notebooks. What we found was the following. Somebody had left a bookmark in the book which said, please contact the British Museum on our telephone number, and that got picked up by the scanner. Okay? So it's kind of amazing the kinds of things that you can do with these things. But we're really big fans, and we think this is the future. Here's some other work that's been done by my colleague Jan Ryan. He's been looking at the distribution of 19th century British newspapers in our collection, and he's just done some nice pretty graphs, but this has all been generated by code which you can edit yourself and you can change yourself. So now I'm going to move on to some examples of things that we've done, and this is going to be very quick. I haven't got time to go through all the examples that we've worked on over the years. There's a link here, and you can go and get access to them, all of them. This is the point really where, if you're interested in doing something with our collections, this is where you might get inspired. And I'm hoping the next few slides you'll see some of that. So I'm going to start with research. And this is a typical example of research at the British Library. And I would say we describe it as researchers are looking for needles in haystacks, finding invisible things or well-hidden things in messy historical data. By the way, that is not a picture of the British Library, librarians amongst you. And the idea is to find these things in messy historical data and unlock them and possibly stimulate new research. But the most important thing is, because we're a cultural heritage organisation, we can often ask our researchers the big question, so what? Why is your research important to humanity? Why is it important to the public? How are you going to tell the public about your research? Why is it relevant? So we often hold them a little bit to ransom and say, well, you need to do something about your research so that other people get to know about it. And that's been a typical pattern of how we've worked with researchers. So this is Bob Nicholson. Bob's, the big lesson of working with Bob was he had an amazing idea, a bit insane, okay? But actually the first lesson is make sure you can get access to the things you want before you even start. Bob's idea, he came to us and said, I want to find all your jokes in your 19th century newspapers, computationally. Sorry, excuse me. First of all, what's even funny, right? So this was his idea. He created something called the Victorian meme machine. And the idea was, ultimately, we created something called the mechanical comedian, which is basically a website which publishes a really bad Victorian joke every day from a database created from scouring text from newspapers and books and putting them into some kind of structure. So, of course, we all want to hear a Victorian joke, so here goes, right? I'm warning you, they're really bad, right? So here we go. So, Ethel, I'm ashamed of you. I saw that Frenchman in the conservatory kissing you repeatedly. Why didn't you tell him to stop? I couldn't, Jack. You couldn't? Why not? I can't speak French. Yeah, they're not brilliant. The great thing about this project, Bob became a bit of a superstar. He started going around the UK and telling bad jokes to the public and on TV. I'm going to show you a little clip of an artist called Rob Walker who took the Victorian mother-in-law jokes and made a kind of Monty Python-esque, slightly weird video, animation of some of the jokes. So the bit I'm going to take you to is the mother-in-law has deeply offended her son-in-law. Okay, so.
You insult me in my own home. Now, Edwin, that's quite impossible. How's that? You live in a rented house. Abigail, before I depart, I must give you this bit of advice. Yes, Mama? Never love a man for money. It's wrong. But never love a man without money. That's just stupid. Good day.
I got a few laughs there, more than I expected. Oh yeah, so the other thing we got Bob to do was he hosted a Victorian comedy night at the British Library where we took these Victorian jokes and we gave them to comedians and they had to try to make them funny again. It was quite hard work. Right, so this is a project from Katrina Navikas, who was called Political Meetings Mapper, and she was particularly interested in something called the Chartist movement. This was a campaign for working men to get the vote. And her idea, what she was interested in was she wanted to find out where these people met and plot them on a map to see if there was anything interesting that happened. The great thing about working with Katrina, it was a dream working with Katrina, she knew exactly which newspaper she wanted to look at. She knew which page and which column. Genius. It was so easy to work with. It was so, so simple. So this was her idea, to take these meetings and plot them on a map over time. That's pretty much the idea. What we discovered was that many meetings took place in London, more than we actually realised. Because of that, we begrudgingly held a tour of these venues. They happened to be mostly pubs. And we dressed up as Victorians, and we went to the final venue, and we then had a little meeting, and it was great. But this is the sort of the take-home. Using a little bit of knowledge and a little bit of computer code, she was able to do something that would have taken her 10 years to do manually. And this is the advantage of having things available in digital form. Actually, I'm going to show you a quick little video. So let's go there. So this is. We've been on the tour, it rained like hell on that day, right? So we're all soaking and wet, and we just got to the Red Lion pub, and we're just about to have a meeting.
Now at the Red Lion pub in Soho, and we've just walked all the way from the British Library, and this is our final destination.
I've stood forward, both in and out of the House of Commons, battling all parties who dare to arrest the people in their onward course on liberty.
I think I've learned a lot from this experience, going to the actual sites, seeing how long it takes to get from one to the other on foot. And I think we've got a flavour of early Victorian London.
Okay. So all my slides have links, and you can explore further. This is another project by Hannah Rose Murray. Hannah had a very similar idea to Katrina. She was interested in the speeches and the performances of the black abolitionists. And these were black men and women and others who were campaigning to abolish slavery. Now, Hannah's project was insanely difficult because she didn't know which newspaper or where these speeches took place. It was incredibly difficult. Whereas Katrina's, she knew exactly which newspaper, which page, which column. So we actually had to use a little bit of AI and machine learning to try to do this. What we were effectively doing was we asked Hannah to give us some examples of things that represented what she was looking for, which she found manually, and we were effectively creating the equivalent of a computational sniffer dog. We were saying, this is what you should, this is what a black abolitionist performance smells like. Go and find, please, in the collection. And we had some successes, but it was actually very, very complicated and very difficult. So a big lesson, sometimes these things can be very, very challenging. This is a project by Surendra Singh, a psychiatrist, retired. He joined, I came to a roadshow like this, and I told him about the 19th century newspapers, and he asked the following question. He said, I want to find newspaper stories from the 19th century about people who suffered from mental illness who came from the Indian diaspora. It's like, wow, okay. What he ended up doing was doing something very different because he couldn't really get the data he was looking for. So he ended up building a suicide corpus using some software called R. Suicide, probably because of the spelling, is unusual. And also there are synonyms like self-murder from the 19th century. And he was able to build a corpus, 50,000 articles, which he was then able to then drill down in terms of identifying gender and ethnicity. And he's kind of now getting very close. It's only taken him 3 years. But he's getting close to now his original research question. So, just to sort of, I'm talking too slowly, I have to speed up. So, scissors and books. How many librarians amongst you? Okay, right. By the way, no books were damaged in this presentation. This is a project that we worked on where we basically did a digital version of this where we cut out images from books and put them online. And all these images are on Flickr. And the idea was we wanted to put them out there. They're all public domain, people can use them. And so the idea is people would identify them and then use them for different projects. So we've had over 17 million tags being added to these and over 1 billion views. I think it's about 1.4 billion now. And this can be a really effective way to get your collections out there using other platforms apart from the British Libraries. So what we learned about crowdsourcing, this is where we're asking the public to engage. What we've learned is the public's actually quite lazy. Okay? 500,000 people added one tag, so for example, fish, dog, cat, and then never came back. How many people do you think come back regularly? Anybody want to have a guess?
2%.
2% of that? Less? Lower? Lower? I'll tell you. It's 18. Okay. James and Mario use computational methods to do the tagging, so they're very clever. They use AI and various other things. Chico is a human tagger. He's 77 years old. He's from Los Angeles. He's tagged over 60,000 images himself. And he does it for the love of it. And that's why he does it. It's very beautiful and it's very simple, but that's why he does it. And he does it so that if it helps other people find images, it's something he feels he's done something useful in his life. And that's why he does it. We've had apps being developed on ships, books, and portraits. We've had a big project at Cardiff University that developed an app to do the tagging. We even had a project called SherlockNet. These are 3 19-year-olds that won our international competition, and they wanted to tag all 1 million images using artificial intelligence. So they had some success. They also tried to do captioning. This is a man standing in the field with a cow, which is not bad. This one is a close-up of a bird on a tree branch. Okay, it doesn't always work. And they've actually been responsible for adding a large proportion of the tags and captions. We've also we built an arcade game. I haven't got time to show you this video, but we built an arcade game. We developed some games to help make tagging easy and fun. This was a project from Adam Crimble. You know that this actually costs more than the electronics. This was about £400. The electronics was about 20 quid. Here's a project from some independent researchers. This is Maurice Nicholson, who's helped tag geotag, so latitude and longitude. He's personally done 12,000 maps himself. He's a retired pharmacist, and he just does it for the love of it. So he just adds latitude and longitude to lots of maps. This is Brenda Findlay. She's retired. She's created a website about Netley Abbey matters. So she's done some personal research in the newspapers and created a website using our newspaper archive. This is Keith Gregson, a historian and author who's written about his hometown, Sunderland, using our archives. This is a commercial project which is called Library Wall. These are books on the wall. It's like a big poster, a big pull-up poster. And on the books are QR codes. With your phone you can download the books. Am I late? Are you going to? Okay.
No.
This is a lovely project called Redesigning Alice. This is a fashion designer. She took the front cover of the original manuscript for Alice in Wonderland, which is called Alice's Adventures Underground. We have the original manuscript from Lewis Carroll. She took the design, made a cloth, and then made bow ties and cufflinks and sold them in our shop. So it doesn't have to be complicated. It can be really straightforward and simple. This is a card game called Movable Type, which was crowdfunded using some of our images, cut-out images. This is an app called Poetic Places, so you can walk around a location and it will bring images and poetry from that location. This is a fashion designer called Nabil Nayal, who fused, get ready, Elizabethan manuscripts with modern day sportswear. Right? And it's actually super cool. He's sold his stuff at London Fashion Week. He's made loads of money. So this is a book that was developed using digitized Hebrew manuscripts and some of the images, the million images that I talked about earlier. It's a book of sort of rituals before you eat. This has sold 50,000 copies. Some of the educational projects. This is a primary school that developed a book called World of Stories. They took some of the images, they worked with the children, the parents, and the teachers to create an international storybook, which they sold. They won our educational award. This is Jonah Cohen, who created something called Pocket Miscellanies, which was sort of little pull-out medieval zines covering these topics. And he was trying to make a point about copyright within organisations and how restrictive it is. This is a project I've been working on with University College London, working with a collection of books and getting the students to curate smaller collections from those books, things like Christian text, female authors, Queens of Britain, theatre, travel. And this is a project I'm working on right now with Terry and Katrina, and basically we're right in the middle of assessing the student projects. Some of them are in the audience today. Basically, the basic remit is we've given them our data and they have to come up with some cool projects, and they are super cool. Like one's a card game. They're just to be honest, my background's teaching, and I really missed. Like yesterday, being with the students, it was wonderful. It was just so inspiring to kind of work with them. But we're assessing another group of students tomorrow, and then we're going to see what we do after them. We probably develop those projects further. This is some staff projects. So this is some world-leading research some of our staff are doing on trying to OCR Bengali texts. So this is optical character recognition of Bengali text. It's never been done before. This is a project called Unlocking Our Sound Heritage. We got some members of the public to become their own curators of some of our sound collections, and they basically took other members of the public around. But this was a project led by a couple of members of staff. This is an animation from a member of staff at the British Library using some of our sound collections. I'll just show you this one. Let's show you a few seconds of this one. It's very beautiful. So these are recordings that we have at the British Library of sounds and various other background noise.
anything in the dreams you want. People not having fights and everything to be normal and not have pollution and no war. Yeah.
Sorry, because of time, I'm going to. You can look at it later in your own time. This is a project that I worked on very early on when I joined the British Library with an artist called David Normal. That's not his real name, okay? That's his artistic name, an artist from California. And what he did was, he took the images we'd released online, and he made these 4 surrealistic collages. That one is a bit, if you know Monty Python, that's quite Terry Gilliam-ish. But all these images were kind of collaged together and made into paintings. He then exhibited them at Burning Man, a big festival in Nevada. Basically, it's surrounded by a giant man, a wooden man, and basically he created these 4 giant panels of this artwork. He emailed me and said, look what I've done with your images. I said, you've done what with our images? I invited him to the British Library, and we eventually created the same artwork but in our own space. And that's David there standing very proudly in his pyjamas, I think they were. And this is an app we developed where as you hover over the painting, once it recognises an image, it takes you back to the page in the book where the image came from. Okay. There's a nice bit of, I'm going to skip this bit because of time. I'm going to go here. This is Mario Klingemann. He's an artificial intelligence artist or code artist. He was our first artistic award winner. This is something he did for his 44th birthday. 44 men who look 44. He used face recognition software to create this. And if you notice, the eyes look from the left to the right. Very clever. But this is superb, right? He used AI to create 500 images in our collection. A hat on the ground spells trouble. So when we met Mario, he was a poor artist. He's now become a bit of a rock star in the art world. This is an artwork he's created called The Butcher's Son, which won a very prestigious prize called the Lumen Prize. This has been generated by a computer. I would say this is Francis Bacon in a horror film. Okay. This is also some artwork that he's sold at Sotheby's. It's based on Western portraiture, and the computer basically creates a male and female image, just algorithmically. This was a lovely little project from Malaysia, a journalist who basically made a music video for her friend's band called The Impatient Sisters. I'll show you a few seconds of this. So this is using images from our collections, it's an animation, and the story is a sailor has put a message in a bottle and a mermaid's going to find it, and they meet each other and they fall in love, they get married and probably get divorced about 5 years later. Anyway. So this just randomly just came into our inbox, and it was really, really useful, very sweet. This is a graphic novel developed by Paul Rand Pierce, and I've done this deliberately because I think somebody's in the audience, so that's purely for their benefit. But they took some of the images and made a graphic novel which they published on Facebook, and it evolved because of the engagement with the public. This is a project to find 50,000 maps in the collection. In the 1 million images that we made available, and this was all done through volunteer effort. And then what I'm going to do, because of time, I'm going to go. I'm actually just going to show you a little video instead because I haven't got time to show you all. But this is the latest exhibition that I've been working on. It's just finished at the British Library. It's called Imaginary Cities. And basically, what this exhibition is all about is taking some of our digitized maps and getting the public's interaction with those maps to create new works, new artworks. So he made 2 digital and 2 physical artworks, but I can't show you all the slides because I've run out of time, but I'll show you the show was actually extended until the 1st of September. Oops, let me just go through. I'm just going to finish here, and this is the quick wrap up. So just to finish off, I've been doing this for 6 years, and what I'm really desperately trying to do is to share my knowledge, experience, and lessons learned with other people who are doing similar things, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We've run a survey in 2018 to look at the GLAM sector, so galleries, libraries, archives and museums, to see who's developing labs or who wants to make a lab. And we've discovered that many want to create a lab, but they don't have the expertise. So we're trying to build a network to share experiences. We ran 2 events, one in September and one in London and one in Copenhagen, called Building Library Labs, which has now become GLAM Labs. And basically, we're trying to download people's wisdom, experience, and expertise via plugging a USB stick into their brain, kind of thing. And basically, through these events, we've collected lots of notes. And what we've actually done, this is about 3 weeks ago, 16 of us got together in Doha, of all places, and we were locked in a hotel for 5 days. And we were forced to write a book about our experiences. It's using a methodology called book sprints, and the idea is that each day when we work on our collaborative efforts, at night there's a team in Australia and New Zealand who are editing our stuff. There's an illustrator from Nicaragua who's providing illustrations, and each day you get the book evolves until you get to the final. I actually did have a copy with me. No, I didn't bring it with me. The book is kind of effectively a manual to sort of talk about how to set these things up, how to maintain them, and how to sustain them. This is just a sneak preview. We've tried to make it practical and funny, so we've included quite a lot of recipes, cooking recipes, but actually they're little jokes about the institutions we work in as well, but they're actually making a serious point. But it's called Open a GLAM Lab, and it's going to be available on the 30th of October. There's a website which has just gone live, glamlabs.io. There's nothing much there at the moment because they're literally just building it right now. There's a mailing list, but if you're interested in joining, please do. And just to finish off, I guess we've held an event in Africa. So we're building, the network is building in Africa, Australia, Europe, North America. We're still a bit weak in South America and Asia. We're going to have an event next year in Riga, in Latvia, hopefully in State Library of New South Wales in Sydney. That date's going to change. It's not going to be March anymore, by the way. I think it's going to be August. Library of Congress is going to be our global event. We're going to have an event in Africa, in Alexandria. And just to finally finish off, really what we're trying to do is pool our knowledge, to be supportive and kind and generous with our expertise. And this is a little manifesto, which I'm not sure will make the final version. What we actually did for fun, we took the communist manifesto and deleted the middle bit and just put our manifesto there instead. But it's really about being generous and kind and sharing our knowledge so that other people don't have to waste their time. And that's me. Thank you very much. I'm hopelessly overrun, and I'm informed. Okay.
This is my turn to talk now.
Okay.
Thank you. That was brilliant. I really enjoyed that. And I know I don't have to say that, but I genuinely mean it. I'd like to open the floor for just like a couple of questions, if anyone's got anything that they'd like to ask Mahendra. Yes, please.
So I work at the National Library of Australia, and we've just received grant funding from budget to increase our digitisation collection. Apart from more money, which is what everybody wants, what can libraries and people in the GLAM sector do to help develop, or ask the government to help develop GLAM labs?
First of all, give them the freedom and the space to experiment and make mistakes, and trust them. So employ people that can do that. I think the minimal team is 3. I've never had 3 people in my team. Library of Congress was stalking us for years. They've just launched their lab in 2017. They now have 9 permanent full-time members of staff. Okay, so labs won't happen by themselves, they require people. So I would say you can spend all this money on digitisation, great. Better to digitise things that people might want. Often things get digitised because a rich philanthropist says, oh, I really want to digitise these medieval manuscripts, without any sort of understanding that maybe nobody's interested. I mean, they might be, but it's really hard later on when you're like someone like me, who's basically a salesperson, saying, "Oh, what would you like to do with these medieval manuscripts?" We've learned the lesson. So we have a program called Heritage Made Digital, which is much more demand-led. So if there's a community that says, we want these things digitized, please get them digitized. If you digitize them, I promise we'll use them for like really cool projects. Then that also should be a driver. But I would say things like labs don't happen by themselves. You need a lot of very resourceful, energetic, passionate people prepared to take risks. Often that is against the culture of the organisation. Often a lot of GLAMs are risk averse. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Thank you.
Any other questions, please? Yeah,
actually, not so much a question, just a comment on the previous thing about trying to kind of motivate government funding. And one idea might be is if the GLAM could talk to any other researchers that are looking for any specific information or data, because if they already have the expertise about finding it or going through it, I reckon you can make a pretty good sort of return on investment argument to anyone who controls the purse strings. But yeah, obviously it's
the researchers and
well, yeah, but sometimes if they say, oh, that saved us 50% of our funding because we're able to do epidemiological research based on old newspaper articles, sometimes that might be useful. But yeah, it's how long's a piece of string?
Yeah, so I think that's a big lesson we've learned at the library, to try to digitise based on demand, to see if there's some kind of demand. Also, a big lesson we've learned is try to sort out the licensing before you start digitising. Trying to do it afterwards is a nightmare, and I think that's the reason why a lot of our collections are still not openly licensed, because doing that retrospectively is really hard. It's a bit like opening up a Pandora's box. Can be. Not always.
Roxanne, please, from the back. You get to be the last one. This question stands between us and wine.
Oh, I was going to make a comment because I was looking. I'm the university librarian at ANU and we digitise lots of archives and various other things. And I was just going to make 2 comments to talk about the influence of wider community engagement, not just thinking about researchers. So I've just looked at the material from our archives and what was downloaded, and it is murders. Pictures of murders, the glory of the winter. And we talk about.
I thought that was like Australian slang for something. Like it's literal murders.
And pubs. And most successful is pubs in the region. And I think one of the things, it's not just about looking at government funding, but saying, well, how do we actually reach the community? so that they feel that libraries, galleries, archives, museums are a vibrant part of the future, and engage them in different ways, often in ways we didn't anticipate. It's all a joy.
I can't agree with you more. I think when I joined the British Library, I think just for me personally, working at an institution that represents the British Empire, that took things from everywhere, including my ancestors, that's quite difficult for me. And I think part of the lab's experience is opening up those collections for everyone, because it actually belongs to everyone, not just academics, but artists, researchers, entrepreneurs, educators, different kinds of groups, because you don't know what they're going to do with it. Who would have known that a fashion designer was going to take the front cover of Alice in Wonderland and make bow ties? Who would have ever thought of doing that? Or, cufflinks. I haven't got the example here, but Lady Diana's dressmaker actually has been using our images to make some commercial products. So it's just, I think the most important thing is just getting it out there and doing things with a good heart and openness and generosity, and then that can lead to all sorts of things you just never planned for.
So I assume there's no copyright on those. Is that what you're saying when you say open access?
Yes. So obviously that some of the stuff is obviously very open.
Yep.
But we have a big chunk of stuff that is only available on site, and that's still quite problematic and difficult, and it's quite painful and it's quite a slow process. But we're slowly beginning to find ways to kind of overcome that. So, for example, somebody had a fantastic idea to take the news clips, and has anybody heard of Cassette Boy on YouTube? Okay, what Cassette Boy does is he takes clips of politicians' words and gets them to say things they don't want to say, right? And it's very clever. But we had a very similar idea. It was called a mechanical filmmaker, and the idea was for the public to be able to take politicians' words. It was very much similar idea, and then piece them together and then get them to say funny things. That project wasn't approved in the end for some obvious reasons, but there are many other things that sometimes, because of the restrictions, you have to be careful about what you can and can't do. I think that I would say out of the 85%, probably at least half of that is probably available openly. It just needs the due diligence and the work and the resources to make that so. But one big lesson I would say for anybody doing digitization, make sure you sort out the licensing first. I know that sounds obvious, but it wasn't obvious to us when we were doing it.
Is that why some of the things are only available on site?
Yes.
Because of licensing?
Well, actually, no, that's a really good question. It's not always licensing. Sometimes we have a holy book from a particular religion which has been digitized, which shouldn't have been digitized. Okay? If we told the world that we've made that available, that would probably cause a diplomatic incident. So sometimes it's religious, sometimes it's ethical. We have photographs of Buddhist monks that that community believes that the soul of those monks have been captured in the photograph, and they don't want anybody else to see those digital images. So sometimes it's complicated. It's not always about copyright. It can be all sorts of reasons.
Well, as I mentioned before, there's wine outside waiting for us. So if you will join me in thanking Mahendra.